Mr. Chairman, you're live on YouTube.
Thank you. Welcome everyone to committee number 7, corporations. Roll call, please.
Senator Boner,
Here.
Senator Boner,
Here.
Senator Case,
Present.
Senator Nethercott,
Here.
Senator Scott,
Here.
and Mr. Chairman Driscoll.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Okay, everyone, we've got 3 bills this morning, so we'll try to keep it fairly tight, and that's for everyone waiting to testify. We don't get bills out today. They won't make it to the next session, so if we keep things pretty tight, it'll be helpful. First bill is House Bill 13, wine and spirits, alcoholic beverage regulation. And I'm going to look back to one of the committee members. I'm not sure to have present. It's once again, this is an interim bill that I was not around on. So perhaps Senator Case or Nethercott, some guidance on who to present.
Mr. Chairman, we certainly can. It's also helpful. I don't know if Mr. Mosier is present, but he always likes to explain these bills too.
That was kind of my go-to was Mr. Mosier or perhaps someone from the Liquor Commission. So
Yeah, and Mr. Chairman, I'm sure Mr. Montoya would be helpful.
Yes.
is Mr. Montoya in the waiting room? If he is, we'll definitely use him.
Mr. Chairman, I just let them both in.
I do love to go through a 34-page bill.
Looks like we have Mr. Montoya here. Welcome, Mr. Montoya, and I will let you go. Like I said, if we can keep it pretty tight, it'd be nice. It's a long bill, but I know you guys have done good work on it. So with that, the floor is yours, and welcome to corporations.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be happy to get through this. House Bill 13, the first 11 pages really is not a big change to the law. Basically what that is just separating microbrewery and winery law. Currently, it's put together under 12.4.412, but it is very, very confusing to read. The distribution models for those two are completely different. So we've had an enormous amount of requests from microbreweries, wineries, and my staff, to be honest with you, to separate the two. So that's really all that does. It doesn't change the law. All we are doing is separating it. So 12.4.14 is winery law, 12.4.14 is winery, 12.4.415 is microbrewery law. When we get to page 11, under 12.5.601, a new article for delivery is put into statute. Delivery is currently allowed via AG opinions and has been since the 1960s. So basically what we wanted to do was just codify this law under 12.5.601, and then it actually allows for a definition of a sealed container as well. Page 14, line 8, that's just cleanup. It was not a correct term for that malt beverage permit in there. We just put the actual term. We're not changing it. We're just making it correct. And then lines 13 through page 15 on line 13, all we're doing is adding the current licenses into the definition of licensees. We're not adding any licenses. We're just putting current licensees in there. We've had a lot of attorneys over the years saying, well, it's not valid if it's not in there. And I said, well, that's not true. It's in statute. But just to save arguments with them, we're just putting it into statute. On page 15, line 21 through 23, and then page 16 through line 8. Okay, this removes the archaic restrictions on who can qualify for a restaurant liquor license. This definition goes back to the 1970s, and obviously the restaurant industry has really changed on over the years. Page 16, line 13 is the industry rep license. That's just cleanup language for stuff that we're doing down the road. 12.2.203 on line 23, and then on line 1, And then on line 14 on page 17, basically what we're doing there is we're just moving the requirement that an industry representative be domiciled in Wyoming. Industry representatives are the brokers. These are the folks that represent the wine companies, the spirits companies, the malt beverage companies. And what this does is, after review with the AG's office, this will put us into compliance with 2 Supreme Court cases, the Granholm v. Heald and the Tennessee v. Thomas case. They felt that we were susceptible to a possible lawsuit. There's law firms all over the suing states all over the United States right now. So this was an easy cleanup. It doesn't really affect us too much. Page 18 on lines 3 through 7. This allows Wyoming distillery, winery, and microbrewery owners to represent their own products as industry representatives. When the Tide House laws were first written, dating back to 1935, this didn't foresee Wyoming distilleries, wineries, or microbreweries. And owners of these companies should be able to represent their own products to retailers and to consumers. So this is just putting it into statute. On page 18, line 17 and 18, and then on page 19, line 3, during the interim, the Corporations Committee wanted to raise the amount of wine that can be direct shipped from 36 liters to 108 liters. That is 4 cases to 12 cases. And that's what that does. And that's been adjusted in the winery law for Wyoming wineries in the earlier that we talked about. On page 19, line 22 and 23, this is just cleanup language to make it less confusing. This really is where licensing authorities can regulate or prohibit. They can issue their license, or they don't have to issue the license. This just clarifies that language. It's totally up to them. Page 20, line 12 and 13, that's just LSO cleanup language from things that we're doing in this cleanup bill. On page 20, line 22 and 23, this eliminates the requirement for the local licensing authorities to place a notice of renewal or transfer on the actual premises. Under current law, and it's been that way since the 1930s, is they actually have to physically go, the city clerk or county clerk, and they have to post a notice on the door or window of a premise. Well, they have this thing now, I think it's called an internet, and they have websites, and they can do it via that way. So, and I think there's only actually a couple of licensing authorities that actually do that anymore. And if we get to page 22 on line 8, this was kind of the crux for this whole bill. In 2017, we did Senate File 43, which was a big revisions bill. And we took out the preferential right language. Nobody had used that in years and years and years. We just forgot to take this part out. It was actually in 3 different sections of statute. We just forgot about this one, and it got by us in the AG's office. And so this is just a finish of the cleanup for 2017. On page 23, line 13 and 14, this eliminates the 5-mile restrictions for county malt beverage permits. Again, during the interim, the Joint Committee asked us to look for some business-friendly revisions to this. Well, this is one of them. Current law says that if you want a county retail malt beverage permit, those can only be issued by county authorities outside 5-mile limit of an incorporated city or town. This will allow a lot of racetracks, rodeo grounds, campgrounds, those types of things to be able to get a malt beverage permit. Line 16 through 23 and clear through page 24, line 11. This lines up in-state and out-of-state direct shipment of wine requirements. We allow in-state wineries to direct ship wine is all. We fixed that several years ago. so that it would be in compliance with the Granholm case. Basically what this does is because of the upgrade of from 36 liters to 108, that's what that's going to do, is just bring it in compliance with those two Supreme Court cases. On page 24, line 16 and 17, that's just renumbering from some of the fixes that we're doing. Page 25, line 1, again, that's just more cleanup from some of these revisions that we're doing. Page 25, line 11 through line 17. This eliminates the restriction of prohibiting the transfer of a resort liquor license. Transfer of location. That's not necessary because resort liquor licenses are unlimited. So in many instances, it couldn't be done anyway, because if it's a resort at a ski, they're not going to move a whole mountain for a transfer. So it really is kind of doesn't need to be in the statute. Page 26, line 6. That's just a cleanup for consistency. It read alcoholic and malt beverage. It should read alcoholic liquor because that's what is in the definitions. Line 7 through the rest of the page, that eliminates the room requirement. For those of you that were around in 2017, we eliminated the room requirements for all other licenses, the retail, the limited club, the resort, the bar and grill, but the restaurant license was a different animal. And so we said that we would be back eventually and get this cleaned up, and that's exactly what this does. This eliminates the room requirements and gives local authorities the ability to just designate an area. I will point out too that on lines 19 through 21, through the word dispensing, that is the House amendment. Basically what they did was just put in the language, nor shall any person other than employees over 18 years of age be permitted to enter the dispensing in its area. You'll see on page 27, the last word of that. On page 27, beginning on line 7, this eliminates archaic restrictions for restaurant liquor licenses. Again, this was one of those business-friendly revisions to Title 12. Basically what it was doing, it just said that restaurant licenses couldn't hold receptions or something like that. And, you know, they pay a fee for their license. So that was one of the revisions we suggested. On page 27, beginning on line 20 through 23, this eliminates the restriction that a county must charge the same fee for a restaurant liquor license if the premise is located within that 5-mile zone. As a business-friendly amendment, we just let county commissioners decide what they want to charge for restaurant liquor licenses. We did do a quick scan of our liquor licenses here at the division, and this will affect 1 or 2 licenses at the most. On page 28, line 14 and 15, this eliminates the ability of someone opening a temporary bar on a 1-day permit. This has been attempted. This was attempted here in Cheyenne a couple of years ago during the big rodeo event. And so that's what that does. On page 22 and 23, line 22 and 23 on page 28, that eliminates the restrictions that a local licensing authority can issue a catering permit under, allowing the local licensing authorities to decide what they want to issue for it, give them the opportunity to decide. Page 29, lines 7 and 8, again, this is for the, eliminates the catering permits can be issued to operate a continuing business, open a temporary bar basically on catering permits. On page 29, line 16 through 22, this is language that is no longer needed because of the, in 2017, 124504, was revamped basically. It was one that was actually due to be done away with in the revisions bill, but it was actually WHAM decided that what they could do is just strip out all the requirements and put some new stuff in there and give them more flexibility. And it's actually worked out pretty well for that. And also last year, 124507, the rodeo bill was enacted. And so Instead of having to do rodeos or these types of functions on a bunch of one-day permits, now they have the ability to do it on a year-round permit for a lot less money. So that's why that language is being stricken. On page 30, line 8 through 12, this is just a clarification language for that special malt beverage permit for the public auditoriums. 124603 on line 18, that's just cleanup from the 124201 of this bill. That's that 5 mile restriction language. Also on line 22 and 23 through line 2 on page 31. On page 31, lines 8, again, that's just cleanup from the changes that we're making here in statute. On line 7, or actually line 16, page 31, what we're doing here is there was a bunch of redundant stuff in statute. So we're eliminating G and J because it said the same thing, that golf clubs and restaurant licenses and retail license could do the same thing. They just had separate paragraphs saying the same thing. So we just put it in one statute saying, just listed the licenses, and we're able to eliminate redundant statute. On page 32, lines 19 and 20, this is just a cleanup language due to the separation of the microbrewery and the winery permits. Page 33, again, same thing. This is just cleanup language on line 9 and 10. And then page 34, beginning on line 1 through line 3, this is clarification language due in part to the 27 language. In that revisions bill in 27, we used an establishment. Well, the big box stores and a lot of the grocery stores have come back and said that they were incredibly confused by this, afraid that kids wouldn't be allowed into their stores. That wasn't what that was meant to be. So we just clarified that language. And then we further defined dispense in lines 8 through 10. And Mr. Chairman, that's really the bill in a nutshell until we get to the repealers, and I'd be happy to go over those, sir.
Please continue. Thank you.
Sure. Okay, on page 34, section 3, repealers, 122201, G, Romanet I, and double I. This is a license for a microbrewery to sell products to a malt beverage wholesaler, which is no longer needed. Microbreweries can use the wholesaler's license. So it was just kind of redundant law. The wholesaler's license will actually even give them a little bit more flexibility. 122501 through 122505, that's keg tag registration. That became law under House Bill 144 in 2006, effective 1/1 of 07. And basically what that did was it required retailers who are selling kegs to actually put a tag and gather information on a tag. As for law enforcement could use. But since 2007, we've never had a request here at the division for that information. So, you know, to save, I don't know, $7,000 to $10,000 a year in keg tags, because retailers are still going to gather this information for deposit reasons. The only difference on this is they just won't have to tag the keg anymore. 124102A Romanet 7, zoning information on the application. Nobody uses that, so we're just eliminating that off of the application. And then Romanet 8, that's the $2,000 purchase requirement in the 2017 revisions bill. We tightened up the requirements for liquor licenses, especially the full retail licenses, quite a bit. And so it's really no longer needed. That's one that will make the clerks extremely happy because they have to get a bunch of receipts. 124103 B through D, issuance of license to more than one person. Wyoming, it's very easy to form an LLC or a corporation to get around this law. To let local licensing authority would be much less complicated for licensees with more than one license. There are many, many, many jurisdictions throughout the state where somebody will own more than one liquor license. They just have to do it under different corporations or different LLCs. And it just creates more of a problem when it comes to their taxes and stuff like that. So this is just going to make it easier. 124201G, license fee for county license must be the same as the town if within the 5 miles. That's no longer needed, so we're just letting the locals decide that within their own jurisdictions. 124407D is an old grandfather clause, no longer needed. A club license to a restaurant license. I don't think that's been used probably since maybe the 40s or 50s. 124409 prohibits the transfer of location for a restaurant liquor license, no longer needed since restaurant liquor licenses are unlimited and have been since 2015. 124410F removes the definition of room for a restaurant liquor license. Local licensing authorities will decide on the designated area. 124412, that was the current winery and microbrewery law intermingled. Very confusing to read, very confusing to understand, and that's why 414 and 415 were created. 124505A and B, malt beverage permit for state fair can issue malt beverage permit under 124504 now. So instead of just having a 1 week or 10-week license, they can do it. And that way they could have fundraisers throughout the year under one permit and probably for less fee. 124602C removes the restriction that a county license cannot be transferred for 6 years if it was part of an annexation. Under current law, if the town grows and they annex a license, then current law says they have to stay in that location for 6 years. Well, every annexation I've ever witnessed, and there's not a lot of them, it happens, but not very many, that licensee is stuck in that location. And so this just removes that requirement. 124603B, same as above for retail malt beverage permit, redundant, not needed. That's the annexation part. And then 125201G through J, that's that redundant statutes I was telling you about. Now they're just incorporated within one area of law. And Mr. Chairman, that's the repealers.
Thank you. Committee questions for Mr. Montoya. Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, could he go back to the House amendment? He went by that so fast, I didn't understand what he was talking about.
Mr. Montoya.
Mr. Chairman, yes, I can. That was on page 26, line 19 through 21. Okay, that was language in the original draft, was just stricken. That was just part of that whole paragraph. But the House wanted to bring this back in, and that amendment just reinstituted the language. And it reads, nor shall any person other than employees over 18 years of age be permitted to enter the dispensing areas. And that's the areas that is designated by the local licensing authorities. So basically, you've got to be of age to be in that area.
Thank you.
Further questions, committee? Further questions? Thank you, Mr. Montoya.
You bet.
We have Mr. Mosier. Do you have any follow-up comments or thoughts, Mr. Mosier?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mike Mosier, Wyoming State Liquor Association. Also speaking on behalf of Chris Brown, Wyoming Lodging and Restaurant Association, who also supports this bill but couldn't be here this morning. I will be very brief, Mr. Chairman, unless there are any questions, lest the proponents of House Bill 15 and 27 wish my early demise. I'll just say briefly that this has been an ongoing process between the Department of Revenue Liquor Division and us in cleaning up Title 12. Mr. Montoya and I have been doing this long enough. Title 12 is almost like our storage room that we feel like we need to keep cleaning out every once in a while and updating and get rid of the stuff that is no longer needed. And that's really what this bill is about. There is no seismic changes, and I hope it stays that way because, you know, if you want to change liquor policy, that's fine. This just refines it, modernizes it, and brings it up to date. One quick thing I do like to clarify, though, there has been some confusion in the past between the difference what we call DTC, direct to consumer, which is direct shipment of product versus delivery. Delivery is already legal in Wyoming. And what this bill does, Mr. Montoya and I were looking at it, it's like, we allow delivery. It's been confirmed by several AG opinions, but there's no sideboards to kind of say it has to do you have to do this and you have to do this. So the light sideboards we set up aren't to a retailer's advantage. They're more for public safety and setting parameters up. Bear in mind, of course, a city or a county can be more restrictive with that. Now with DTC, we only allow direct to consumer with wine. It does raise the limit in here, which caused us some trepidation, but we can live with it. There will be an amendment, I believe, in a little bit, or that you may have all seen, that creates further sideboards with delivery, and we're fine with that. In short, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, this is a very good bill. This is the culmination of years and years of work. We knew we'd have to come back to House Bill 13 with House Bill 13 when we passed the bills back in 2017. And so at your invitation, we did. So here we are. We support this bill, and I'll take any questions.
Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, so this bill is really a cleanup that should not be controversial. Am I right in thinking that the most substantive change in here, or most potentially controversial one, is where the committee increased the amount of wine that could be shipped direct to consumer? Is that a fair statement?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Scott, yes, that's a fair statement. That was not in the original language of this bill, and that was done in committee. The Wine Institute and us work together, and we can live with the amount in the bill. We don't want to go any higher. We certainly don't want to go unlimited. The vast majority of states allow DTC of wine, but they don't allow DTC of spirits or malt beverages. This one puts us kind of in the middle of the road with the amount. And as you probably know, there were several amendments to lower it in the House. That's a policy decision, but we're fine with this amount. We just pray it doesn't change any further.
Further questions, committee? Further questions? Thank you. Do we have any public testimony? I don't see anybody in the waiting room. Is that correct? We have no public. Senator Scott, did you raise your hand? Senator Case does have his hand up. Senator Case.
Mr. Chairman, with regards to public comment, I think there is, and I think that Mr. Pickard.
They're showing now. They didn't
Okay.
go in my room, and
All right.
Pickard, and I see 2 or 3 now. So
Okay, I'll shut up. Thank you,
roll
Mr.
right
Chairman.
in. Thank you. I was just looking on my sidebar, didn't have a single person, and obviously I'm off. So we'll go to Mr. Pickard next, who I think's got some others as well. Welcome, Mr. Pickard.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the opportunity to discuss a House Bill 13. Members of the committee, my name is Dave Pickard. I represent Southern Glazers Wine and Spirits and Republic National Distributing Company, members of the Wine and Spirit Wholesalers of America. We've been following this bill since its path through the interim committees and are in support of the bill. We've brought to the attention of the interim committee and to the House committee our concerns about preserving the 3-tier system of alcohol delivery in the state of Wyoming. And the amendment that I hope everybody was able to open on their computers last night, I see your head shaking, Senator Scott. I'll actually read the amendment for everyone's benefit here in just a minute. But what this amendment proposes to do, as Mr. Mosier indicated, is just continue to put just a little bit more sideboard on the delivery. We wholeheartedly support local delivery of alcoholic beverages. It's a public safety issue, as Mr. Mosier had indicated earlier. And it does not, one of the things that we're concerned about when we start talking about delivery is the difference between delivery and shipping. He also discussed direct to consumer, and that's our concern as well, that nothing in this bill gets construed as moving into shipping of alcoholic beverages, primarily in the spirits world. So what this amendment does, and Mr. Mosier and Mr. Montoya have seen it, and some other stakeholders that are typically in these discussions have seen it. And I do apologize. I see Mr. Odekoven on the in the waiting room as well, and I haven't shared it with him, but it's very simple. What it does is propose to limit the delivery aspect, local delivery, to the operating hours of the licensee. So at page 12, line 5, after application, we propose that the committee, and I have two options I want to share, and it just comes down to wordsmithing. But the first option is after applications, insert a comma, and all deliveries must be completed during the licensee's remaining operating hours of the day that the alcoholic beverage is removed from the inventory of the licensed premise. So that is one option, or an alternative would be, again, after application, insert the comma. Once the ordered alcohol leaves the licensed premise, delivery must be completed by the time the licensed premise closes. Both of those options get to the same thing that we're after, which is to complete the delivery within the legal hours set by the municipality in their licensing and their local ordinances. And then it also provides some consumer safety if the delivery person, whether it be an employee or a contract delivery person, is unable to make that delivery for a variety of reasons. Maybe the person that ordered it went to another house party down the street and can't be located. They can get the product back into the inventory of the licensee. And also in the instance where they're unable to verify age, or they're under potentially, I suppose, under the tips training that they have, they recognize that they shouldn't be serving that recipient or that consumer. So those are the safeguards. I hope I've been able to explain it, Senator Scott, in just verbally for you. And I would stand for any questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Questions, Mr. Pickard? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We will hear from Mr. Odekoven next. We'll take a law enforcement perspective. Welcome, Mr. Odekoven.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Byron Odekoven, representing the Wyoming Association of Sheriffs and Chiefs of Police, rising in support of the bill. I appreciate the good work of the Liquor Division, doing their best to streamline our kind of chaotic hodgepodge set of statutes, if you will, as in the years past, they've modified pieces, but never looked at the totality for a degree of clarity. Now, having said that, and I'm late to the party, Mr. Chairman, and the internet version of the engrossed bill does not have page numbers, or at least page numbers don't show up on mine, and I'm not real sure where I'm at, so to speak. So, and I did ask before the committee meeting, and unfortunately with the accelerated schedule, I'm not quite up to where I should be in terms of providing you or Mr. Montoya the question I'm about to raise. So for that, I apologize, and I'll be referring to the page number from the original bill so I can keep my context straight with just a couple of simple questions for clarity that when I was looking through the engrossed copy, may have actually been fixed in the House, but I'm going to rely on LSO and or Mr. Montoya to clarify and point out some of the, as we go forward, and it may need an amendment in the long run. So with that, Mr. Chairman, in the original bill on page 31, under 125201, line 17, includes a restaurant liquor license in the conversation, and starts on 20 and 21, may dispense alcoholic beverages from any location within the licensee's premises. Okay, and I think that's still in the engrossed version. However, back on page 26, starting on line 6, said for restaurants, alcoholic liquor and malt beverages shall be dispensed and prepared for consumption in the licensed building area approved by the local licensing authority. So I think our approval by the local licensing authority is the proper direction. I pointed out that there may be a slight conflict and want to ensure that that conflict is properly dealt with so that we have the dispensing being authorized by the local licensing authority, and we don't grant something in totality later in the bill that we restrict in the beginning of the bill, if that makes sense, Mr. Chairman. And with that, I'll pause before question number 2.
Senator Case. Senator Case, can you hear me?
Yes, and my Alt-A doesn't work to unmute, and I apologize. I just want to point out for Mr. Odokoven and the rest of the folks that may be having the same problem tracking a bill in the waiting room, that when you go to the website and you click on the bill, it pulls up the version without line and page numbers. But if you roll it over, you have choices of PDF files, one of which is introduced, one of which is engrossed. And so the way to track what we have in front of us would have been to pull up the PDF of the engrossed version. You'd have line and page numbers. I'll leave it at that. I know that the licensing authority will answer a specific question.
And thank you, Mr. Chairman, and for that, Senator Case. I appreciate that. And actually, upon reflection, I remember that. It's just it hadn't come up this year, and gray hair and memory from time to time gets away from me. So thank you for that. I'm not sure if Mr. Montoya would be ready to answer that one, or if you want him to do that before I ask question number 2, or ask question number 2 and proceed, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Montoya, I think let's break this off one piece. This is a good one. If you could answer, please.
Sure, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Odokoven. This was done a number of years ago. Licensing authorities still have to approve a designated area under this bill. It's been a room since the 1970s when restaurant law came into effect. But then a few years later, probably in early 2000s, late 90s, somewhere in there, these restaurant licenses at guest ranches, and there's not a lot of them, but there's a few, wanted to be able to have like a chuck wagon lunch for their guests. And so they asked the legislature if they could, give them a beer or a glass of wine at these lunches. And that's why that went into 125201. Same thing with the golf courses. In fact, I remember when I was a field investigator, I actually popped a golf course up in Natrona County because they were selling beer on the course. So they said, well, what can you do? And I said, well, talk to your legislator. And they did. And so the legislature allowed golf courses that have restaurant licenses to be able to sell on the course. So it's just an extension of that license in 125201. It's not a conflict, it's just an extension.
Further questions? Proceed on, Mr. Odokoven, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And for clarity, the question came from the trenches, if you will, because I asked the sheriffs and chiefs to view with their city and county clerks for clarity of the legislation as they would go forth and look at regulation within their licensing authority area. So clarity is always good when folks like that are looking at the bill and saying, well, it doesn't quite make sense to me. How am I going to react to that? So thank you, Mr. Montoya, and we'll proceed with, may have some questions of the division as all of this proceeds. Question number 2, again, for clarity from a clerk. So on the original page 27 for 124411 talks about state that no restaurant licenses shall not promote or operate the restaurant as a bar and lounge. Okay, and I believe we're doing away with part of that. Understand that. Unless they serve wine. So if they serve wine, they can promote themselves as a bar and lounge. But then on page 3, line 19, again, back at the beginning in the original bill, talks about the cessation of full service restaurant operation may serve a limited menu and continue to serve wines authorized by a winery permit. So again, the clerks were looking at that as a conflict of The restaurant may not advertise as a bar and lounge unless they serve wine. But if they stop being a restaurant and they still serve wine, do they have to have a menu? Not quite sure how this restaurant slash. So from a clerk's perspective, how do they, as the licensing authority, categorize that licensee, Mr. Chairman?
Back to Mr. Montoya, please.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Oderkoven, yeah, actually what's happening is you're confusing two sections of the law. And yeah, in this bill, they still can't operate as a bar. They never could. Okay, restaurant licenses just had a separate room. Okay, and they would serve to tables and booths in a restaurant. The law in that room said no consumption could take place in that room. It was usually just a little 3-foot by 5-foot room. Okay, what you're referring to on the wine side, though, is a number of years ago, both wineries and microbreweries went to the legislature and said, we want to be able to hold a license in conjunction. Okay, so a winery, and Wyoming has, I don't know, 5, maybe 6 wineries. They can hold a license in conjunction with the winery. And that can be a restaurant license, or it can be a retail or resort, a bar and grill. But restaurant licenses are very easy to obtain because they're unlimited. And so what they did, though, when they went and asked if they can hold it in conjunction, is could they serve a limited menu? Because under restaurant law, okay, is once you cease the sale of food, you have to cease the sale of alcohol. And so they asked both the microbreweries and the wineries that hold it in conjunction, could they have a limited menu and continue to sell their product? That doesn't hold for a regular restaurant, just for those who hold it in conjunction with either a winery or a microbrewery.
Satisfied, Mr. Oderkoven?
Mr. Chairman, if nothing else, the exercise points out that from time to time there's a degree of confusion in the statutes, and we'll rely on the expertise of Mr. Montoya to assist with our clerks and our licensing authority to keep everything straight, Mr. Chairman, as it should be. Thank you.
Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, on the first question you raised, should we put an amendment on page 31 after licensee's premises, the end of the sentence, that said for restaurant liquor licenses, these provisions are subject to 12.4.410B. So that makes it clear that any restrictions the city puts on takes precedence.
Mr. Chairman, if that's directed toward me, I would offer clarity is always better. And then having said that, I defer to Mr. Montoya to make sure that in the rewrite, if you will, that's not already clear.
We'll go to the man, Mr. Montoya.
Mr. Chairman and Senator Scott, Mr. Oderkoven, I don't really feel it's needed, but it's up to you. Because if you read the statute in whole, because what we're doing is we're just reading it in part, but if you read it in whole, it's pretty clear. Especially on those extensions, there's not a lot of restaurants on golf courses or guest ranches. So is it needed? I don't, it's up to you. It won't hurt anything.
Senator Scott, further questions?
Mr. Chairman, I think if it is causing some confusion with the city officials, then maybe it is needed. But I'd like to hear what Mr. Mosier thinks.
Mr. Mosier, you've been.
Mr. Chairman, members of Senator Scott, I would agree with Mr. Montoya. I don't think it's really needed, but if it makes people more comfortable, the idea of this bill is to make things clear. So if there's an added amendment, I don't think it really changes anything. And if it makes everybody feel better, I'm fine with it.
Thank you. I have one question now that's going to be confusing. So this is personal. I just put in a miniature golf course. Do we have definition of golf courses? This could become a problem. I'm dead serious. We just put in a 18-hole miniature golf course that's fairly substantial. Am I now falling under a piece of golf course legislation that I can sell beer on my golf course or drinks? Mr. Montoya?
Mr. Chairman, golf course is not defined, so I guess that would work.
Okay, I really was trying to be honest about it because it's a loophole I know my county attorney would ask about.
I know your county attorney, and you bet he would.
Thank you. Mr. Odekoven, further testimony?
Mr. Chairman, no, thank you for indulging me in a degree of clarity. And as I said, we'll rely on the good Director Montoya for expertise going forward.
Perfect, thank you. Mr. Rudin, I hope I'm not getting your name wrong.
Hi, it's Rudd, but that's okay because I get it all the time.
I started that way and I didn't know which way. So my apologies.
No, it's no problem at all. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and committee members. My name is Tyler Rudd. I am Central States Counsel for the Wine Institute, which is a public policy advocacy trade association made up of about 1,000 California wineries and associated businesses. I'm here to testify in support of House Bill 13, particularly the increase in how much in-state and out-of-state wineries can directly ship to consumers. We're also in support of the ability for restaurants and retailers to deliver to consumers, as that's been a lifesaver for not just those businesses, but also for the alcoholic beverage industry in general. Under current law, as you may know, the amount of wine that wineries can directly ship to wine consumers is one of the lowest in the countries. So increasing it to the amount that's in the legislation would put it more in line with surrounding states, particularly South Dakota and Nebraska, which is 12 cases per year. This will help not only Wyoming wineries, but all out-of-state wineries as well. And to this end, I'll keep it short. I'd like to thank the Joint Committee for taking up this legislation, the Liquor Division, Mr. Moser, and others for working with us on this bill. And thank you, committee members, for your consideration of HB 13. I'll stop there, but I welcome any questions regarding the direct shipment of wine in general, any differences between Wyoming and other states and the amounts shipped or taxes, or any other questions that the committee may have for me. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Questions for Mr. Rudd? I've got one that's kind of followed, and it'll probably go to Mr. Montoya, is when we allow direct shipment of up to X number of cases a year, how does the Liquor Commission keep track when we've got 30 or 1,000 different retailers shipping? Is there paperwork that goes through the commission to make sure that I order 8 cases, my wife orders 8 cases, and my son orders 8 cases? How's our procedure work to track that?
Mr. Chairman, very good question. We have about 1,100 out-of-state shippers licensed with the Wyoming Liquor Division. And the law reads today they can have 36 liters per household. You know, there are some people that will order at their house and then probably order at their office as well. But when you have 1,100 different suppliers, you can still order a bunch of different wines. What they do, what is required with that license is they have to send us a form once a month, even if they don't sell into Wyoming. 0 reports are required, so we know who's reporting and who's not. They give us the amount. We have a protection in there that says anything over 90 liters, we can actually list at the Liquor Division. That's been on the books since 2000s. We've never used it. And that's really a matter of warehouse space. I mean, our warehouse is only so big, and we can only, I think we stock around 1,000, 1,100 different kinds of wines here at the Liquor Division. But there's just a lot of wines out there, and it's, you know, a lot of people. There are a lot of small wineries. Mr. Rudd can probably speak to this better, but there are a lot of really small wineries, and their allocation is very small. And so they only ship via direct shipment and stuff like that. So, people have an opportunity to drink wines that there's no way that they could buy them locally. But yeah, that's all tracked through the liquor division. We have a database just for that and collect the funds. And, the wineries are really good. Retailers, importers, they're very good about submitting paperwork and doing this. And it's not that expensive for them either, but we do all right.
Perfect. One last, the funds do travel through you and you get your commission or your retail markup then on these as well.
Mr. Chairman, the statutes require a 12%. And of course that's excise tax and then cost of doing the business, but that goes to the general fund. Yes.
Very good. Thank you. Further questions, committee? Further questions? Thank you, Mr. Rudd. Good testimony. Kelly Little next. Welcome, Ms. Little.
Morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Kelly Little. I'm here today on behalf of the Wyoming County Commissioners Association. The WCCA has taken a position of support on this bill. We appreciate that this bill will allow for increased creativity and flexibility to businesses in our local communities, with the possibility of additional revenue through business opportunity and growth. This bill creates consistent local jurisdictional policy throughout statute and clarifies local control over licensing decisions, which our members appreciate. That's all I have this morning, Mr. Chairman. I would be happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Little? Any questions? Thank you, Ms. Little. Do we have any further public testimony? I'm not seeing any more coming up. Seeing none, we will go back to the committee. Committee, what is your pleasure?
Move the bill.
Thank you. We'll move in. We have one amendment that I know of. I think we'll go ahead and start with Senator Case. Senator Case.
I'm gonna have to get my Alt-A fixed. But anyway, Mr. Chairman, I was a conflict on this bill during the interim. I'd like to declare that conflict now. I have a resort liquor license in Lander.
I will do the same, Senator Case. I hold both a malt beverage permit and a full retail license. I hate to cripple the committee, but it's kind of where it's at. So with that, we'll go ahead and move on to the amendment. Does anyone on the committee have a preference? We had two options on the amendment of which one they'd like to see. We've got a lawyer here. Senator Nethercott, do you have a preference? Okay, I think we'll just go ahead and go with the first one then.
But Mr. Chairman, if I can, I mean, because this is the only time that we're able to discuss it as opposed to on the floor about what happened on the other body. I think these amendments really, I think, created a lot of confusion with the bill on the House side. Of course, that doesn't mean the same is true for the Senate. So I just urge caution, though, that I'm hopeful that these amendments we can work through without potentially killing the bill or further complicating a bill that isn't particularly controversial. So I would just say that. But Mr. Chairman, if you would like to go ahead and give the options of the two amendments, thank you.
Okay, I think that as presented, and I think that came to everybody. The first option was all deliveries must be, and this is on page 12, line 5. All deliveries must be completed during the licensee's remaining operating hours of the day the alcoholic beverage is removed from the inventory of the licensed premise. Or page 12, line 5, once the ordered alcohol leaves the licensed premise, delivery must be completed by the time the licensed premise closes. They're both very similar. I kind of like the first one, but I'm game to look at either. And I'll let someone from the committee move if they would like to. Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move the first one.
Thank you. It's been moved. We're not doing seconds, so it's moved. Discussion on the amendment. Question being called. All in favor, raise your hand. And I will vote on the amendment. I believe I can do that with conflict, Senator Case. Thank you. Amendment has passed. We're back on the bill. Further discussion on the bill. Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, I'm not going to offer the amendment I thought about. I'll take a chance at this with this virtual session that the liquor division is right, and that careful reading of the statute will eliminate the confusion. We may have to fix that later. Mr. Chairman, this was a bill that was very carefully worked in the joint interim. And frankly, I think it's ready to go and we ought to pass it.
Committee, further discussion.
Question on the bill.
Question being called. We are voting on, let me get to the top of the bill so I can get my title. House Bill 13, alcoholic beverage regulation. We call the roll, please.
Senator Boner,
Aye.
Senator Case,
Conflict.
Senator Nethercott,
Aye.
Senator Scott,
Aye.
Chairman Driscoll.
Conflict.
Mr. Chairman, you have 3 ayes, 2 conflicts.
A lot of drinking going on.
Excuse me, Senator Case.
Mr. Chairman, there's a lot of drinking going on.
Yeah, you and I can't though. It's too bad, huh? Next bill up is House Bill 27, Business Code Revisions. And I am in the same boat. I'm sorry to keep doing this where I wasn't here on the interim. Who is best to present? I didn't do my homework ahead of time. I'm sorry.
Mr. Chairman, is the Secretary of State's office present?
I'm not seeing anybody in the room. That's part of my problem. My panel doesn't allow me to see.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Nethercott, I just let him into the room.
Very good. So we have a whole group from the Secretary of State's office. Welcome to Senate Corporations. I'll let you identify yourself, and we're on House Bill 27 Business Code Revisions. And if you could walk us through this, I would much appreciate it. I'm going to step out. Senator Nethercott, if it comes back real quick, could you take the meeting, please?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. This is Karen Wheeler, the Deputy Secretary of State. And are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Wonderful. Thank you. I have with me today Lisa Gonzalez, our Business Division Director, and Jordan Gray, the Assistant Business Division Director. They are going to walk you through House Bill 27, which is really just a cleanup bill, and then it has a section that pertains to our budget reductions in which we need some statutory changes. So with that, I will turn it over to Director Gonzalez.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. This House Bill 27 addresses inconsistency statutory language throughout Title 17 and Title 40 of the business statutes. This bill also addresses necessary statutory changes that are tied to our first 10% budget reductions of the Secretary of State's office has made. These changes address statutory required mailings of notices to entities. To save time, most of you have heard the bill through the interim, so I'll go through component by component if that's okay with you. Okay, the bill consists of 33 pages that contains modifications to the business code. As we go through the bill, you will see repetitive language throughout it that provides consistency and clarification between several of our business statutes. As I mentioned, there are 5 components to the bill. We're going to start with powers. This section provides consistency throughout our business code. Many chapters of our business code provide general rulemaking authority to the Secretary of State's office. This bill incorporates the rulemaking authority in 3 chapters where it was lacking. Starting on page 1, line 15, it's Wyoming Statute 17-14210. It's the Limited Partnership Act. It creates language to include powers in this section. and it continues through page 2, lines 2 through 6. Then we jump to page 4, beginning with line 13 through 19. It covers the Uniform Limited Partnership Act. And then we jump to the bottom of page 4, which is Wyoming Statute 40-2-110. It refers to trade name registrations, and it includes the power language as well, which continues on page 5, lines 1 through 5. The second component of the bill refers to reinstatement following revocation for foreign nonprofit corporations. Currently, domestic Wyoming formed and foreign profit corporations, which are entities that are formed outside of the state of Wyoming, any other state, as well as another country. These entities have the ability to reinstate within 2 years of the date that the Secretary of State office has administratively dissolved or revoked these entities for failure to file an annual report or for not retaining a registered agent. This creates a new section, Wyoming Statute 17-19-1533, that allows for a foreign nonprofit to reinstate. This mirrors our current law, Wyoming Statute 17-19-1422, for domestic nonprofit reinstatements. This begins on page 2, lines 8 through page 4, ending on line 11. The third component of the bill is refusal to file documents. The Secretary of State's office has the authority to refuse documents for filing if the documents do not contain statutory required information. Under Wyoming Statute 17-16-125, the Secretary of State's office must return or refuse a document with an explanation for refusal within 15 days of submission. Amending the following 9 areas would provide consistency of the 15-day refusal time period throughout all entity types. This begins on page 5, lines 7 through 14. And this creates the section for trade names. Page 7 creates a section for limited partnerships. Page 12 corrects the refusal period from 5 days to 15 days in the Nonprofit Act. Page 16 incorporates the language for uniform partnerships. Page 18, beginning on line 5, incorporates the language for Registered Limited Partnership Act. Page 19, beginning on line 21, this incorporates the language for the Uniform Nonprofit Association Act. Page 21 incorporates the language for the Statutory Trust Act. Page 26, beginning on line 10, incorporates language for the Limited Liability Company Act. And then on page 30, beginning on line 9, incorporates language for the Statutory Foundation Act. The fourth component of the bill is for conversion of entities. The amendment will prevent situations where an entity can pay less for their formation by filing as one entity type and then converting to another entity type. The bill provides if no fee is set by statute, the fee for a conversion shall be equal to the fee for the new origination of the newly converted entity type. And this begins on page 21, lines 22. Then the fifth component of the bill provides statutory changes necessary for our budget reductions. These amendments address statutory changes that are tied directly to the Secretary of State's 10% budget reductions. The reductions pertain to the mailing of notices to entities. These notices include trade name and trademark renewals, notices to entities that they have not filed their annual report upon their due date. Prior to these mailed notices, these businesses have received 3 courtesy email notices 60, 30, and 10 days prior to the due date. Also included are dissolution notices of entities that become inactive for failure to file their annual report. Each month, the Business Division of the Secretary of State's office is required to mail over 12,000 notices. This equates to 156,000 mailings a year just for the Business Division. The cost of these mailings is $85,800 a year. The mailing budget for the entire office was $175,750 a biennium. To meet this 10% budget cut, part of the reduction include reducing the mailing budget by $143,520. This leaves only $32,230 a biennium, or $16,115 a year for the entire office. These amendments allow the Secretary of State's office to send these notices electronically. It is important to note that out of over 240,000 active business entities, our office, there are only 113 entities that have not provided us any kind of email address. And we are willing to work with these business entities by contacting these email addresses.
Pardon me.
The primary change that allows this is in Chapter 28, Title 17. The chapter is amended to require registered agents and business entities to provide and maintain an email address with our office so that we may use to serve documents on business entities or registered agents. And this only applies in rare times when the Secretary of State's office provides service of process. These changes begin on page 22, lines 6 through 8, page 22, lines 19 and 23, and it continues through page 26, line 5. Along with those changes, there are various chapters relating to the business entity in Title 17 that discuss notices and service of process delivered by the Secretary of State's office. These are amended by adding language to allow these services by electronic means in the following areas. Page 7 incorporates language for the Cooperative Marketing Association. Beginning on page 8, it incorporates language in the Limited Partnership Act. And then on page 8 for foreign corporations, beginning on page 12 for nonprofit corporations, goes on through page 15. Beginning on page 16 on lines 2, Uniform Corporation Act. Page 17 is registered limited liability partnerships. And then page 20 is the Nonprofit Association Act. Beginning on page 27 is the Limited Liability Company Act. Page 30 is the Statutory Foundation Act. Mr. Chairman, without these statutory changes, the $16,115 a year that is left in the Secretary of State's office budget for mailing costs will be depleted within 2 months. And then finally, on page 22, line 2, a new section is created, Wyoming Statute 40-2-111. This is a new section that is created for the Trade Name Act that addresses returning a refused document within 15 days of submission. And the effective date of this bill would be July 1st, 2021. Mr. Chairman, this is a quick assessment of the bill, and we are happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Questions? Ms. Wheeler, I'm having a hard time getting my screen up. Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, and Mr. Chairman, I'll say at the outset that I don't have quite the confidence in this bill that I had in the last one. I don't think we worked it quite as carefully in the joint interim. It appears to me, Mr. Chairman, that in many other areas we've said, okay, we're going to use email, give businesses a choice, but they can still get the hard copy if the email doesn't work for them. I take it we're going away from that in this bill.
Ms. Wheeler?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Scott, notices will be sent via email. And unfortunately, we do have to do this for our budget cuts. Now, I will tell you the notices that are sent can obviously be also sent via hard copy should someone request it.
Senator Scott, follow up?
Mr. Chairman, that's not always been my experience, but I think, Mr. Chairman, what's happened is they need to eliminate a position or two so they can do the rest of their work.
Ms. Wheeler, would you like to respond to that?
Mr. Chairman, I would also just like to point out that these email notices that we're talking about, 90% of those are going to commercial registered agents. Those are the registered agents that represent more than 10 entities. We do have one that represents over 50,000 entities. So these are notices that go out telling them that they have an entity that is delinquent in filing its annual report. And keep in mind again, that they have already received 3 courtesy emails letting them know when their annual report is due.
Senator Scott, follow up.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, and I don't have any problem with that. The commercial ones are fine, but many of our smaller businesses out in the rural areas, they don't use one of the professional agents. They'll use a family member or something like that. And I do have some concern about the not getting the written notice there if they want it.
Senator Case.
Mr. Chairman, it's kind of hard to have a conversation, not necessarily pick on the Secretary of State's office or whatever, but the world of email notices is we're well underway. I will say that I appreciate it, and if we should pick on anything, it should be the U.S. Postal Service, because I don't know if you guys have had trouble with your mail and the whole idea of whether you do it registered mail or not. The comment that the president made the other day, that if you get anything that's certified or registered, you have to sign for it. Nobody signs for it. And the mail is just atrocious. And this is a way to provide notice. I think people do understand, that there's an annual requirement to be involved with the Secretary of State's office. It's essential to their corporation being in good standing. The Secretary of State's office provides plenty of notice. And then there is very generous ability to get back in good standing if you've let any of these deadlines lapse. So I think we've been over backwards, and I think we're doing a good job here.
Thank you, Senator Case. Senator Nethercott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I too am grateful to the Secretary of State's office for its courtesy emails, which I need in spades, to remind me to get those annual reports in. And so, this brings up a great conversation that we're having with the state right now. I mean, the Secretary of State's office has provided a solution that they feel is appropriate based on their ability to continue to serve the people of Wyoming, which of course they do and do well, that it's time to transition to the email filings. And as we are tasked with understanding how to reduce essential services, this is one of those where we're asking the people of Wyoming, listen, we're going to have to cut budgets and things are going to look differently. We're going to still try to provide you the services we had before, but it may not look the same as it has historically. And I think this is a very easy compromise and an easy step forward, and one that we should support for our Secretary of State.
Thank you. Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, question on the foreign corporations and their registering to do business here in the state. And I understand how it works with the larger corporations, but how does it work with the smaller ones? Suppose you have, and let's just have a hypothetical, suppose you have somebody, say his business is pumping septic tanks and they're incorporated and they're operating in Montana, but 20 or 30% of their customers are in Wyoming. What happens if they don't bother to register to do business in the state, but just do it?
Ms. Wheeler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Senator Scott. This has been something longstanding within our statutes for as long as I can remember, and I've been here a long time. But as soon as we are notified that someone is operating in Wyoming and they have not filed a certificate of authority with our office, they are subject to a $5,000 fine, which we have had to assess quite often.
Thank you. Senator Boner.
Yeah, just going back to that previous discussion a little bit, just so I understand, because not every business is even going to have an email address, and I guess representing a rural area where, there's limited internet access. I just want to make sure I understand this. So say in that instance where there is not, a business just doesn't have an email address, maybe they don't have a solid internet connection. How is the Secretary of State's office going to deal with that situation in the circumstance where maybe they just don't have an email address? Or is there still going to be an opportunity to communicate with those businesses through mail? And if that's the case, then I don't have any concerns. But if you're going to require every last small business to have an email address, that might be a concern to me.
Senator Boner, thank you. I was going to ask the same question. I think Ms. Wheeler referred that they do mail with anybody that requests it. Could you confirm that, Ms. Wheeler?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Senator Boner. I appreciate your thoughts and the comments. So as Director Gonzalez said, out of over 240,000 active entities registered with us, we only have 113 who have not provided us with an email. So we will reach out to all of those. And if there is a case where simply they don't have an email because they do not have the proper internet service, of course we'll work with them and we will make a note in the file and we will send them their notices.
Ms. Wheeler, do you have a ability through your rules if someone wants to pay another $1 or $2 on their corporate filing to let them check a box to cover that cost for you in the mail? And if not, I might consider it, because I've operated the same way. I love your emails, by the way. I'm going to tell you from my end, I'm an old paper guy from way back, and we've lost stuff nonstop in the mail. And your notices and your repeated stuff via email, I think, is pretty state of the art and good. But do you have the ability through rules for us to assess a fee for the people that want to add on the mail? Because it is an additional expense. That's apparent.
Mr. Chairman, no, we don't have that in our rules, and some of our fees are set by statute, so they'd have to be a statutory change. Some are by rules. What we have done for those that do submit documents to us and they want a paper copy in return, we ask them to send a self-addressed envelope. Now, getting a notice sent via the mail versus an email is a little bit different, whereas we can't ask for a self-addressed envelope, but we will find a workaround for it.
Thank you. Questions? Further questions, committee? Thank you. Very good testimony. Do we have anyone else to testify on the bill in the waiting room?
Mr. Chairman, I do not see anyone with their hand raised.
Okay, with that, public testimony.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, one more. Just raise their hand.
Oh, I'm not seeing it. Mr. Meyer, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Scott Meyer on behalf of the Wyoming Bankers Association. We were involved with, during the interim, talking about the stuff that the changes that the Secretary of State's office is proposing. Without belaboring anybody, I would tell you that I agree completely with the comments that were made by Senator Case and Senator Nethercott. Having dealt with a lot of these things, even in my own private law practice, a lot of the mailings that we were getting are probably going into the shred pile anyway, because we also are getting everything through the email. I think that the reminder notices, everything that comes up on behalf from the Secretary of State's office on the emails are very welcome. I, like Senator Nethercott, appreciate those things probably in spades. It's just it's really nice to get that information. If in fact I have a client that doesn't even have an email address and I receive those, that's one way that we can deal with it. But I know that some of the folks that don't even have an email address are able to get the information they need from Secretary of State's office. And so I just wanted to tell you that we think the bill is well drafted and stand in complete support of it.
Thank you, Mr. Meyer. Any questions for Mr. Meyer? Thank you. Do we have any further public testimony in the room? Seeing none, we're back on the bill. Committee, what is your pleasure?
Move the bill.
Bill's been moved. Senator Case, got a second? Go ahead, Senator Case. Push your bar 2 or 3 times.
I wear bifocals, and without them, it's like I can see good in an area, but I'm sorry I lose all that. Anyway, support the bill, Mr. Chairman.
Very good. Any amendments on the bill? Any amendments? Sensing none, any further testimony on the bill or any comments on the bill from the committee? Sensing none, roll call on the bill, please.
Senator Boner,
Aye.
Senator Case,
Aye.
Senator Nethercott,
Aye.
Senator Scott,
No.
and Chairman Driscoll.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, you have 4 ayes and 1 no.
House Bill 27 is passed the Senate Corporations Committee. Next bill, and we're going to be a little bit up against time, but it's not a real long one, be House Bill 15, Department of Transportation and Communication Facilities. Same standard deal. I'm not sure on who to present. I'm kind of sad to have a chairman that's lost all the time. I think it's a pretty simple bill. Senator Case.
Mr. Chairman, I'm sure that General Director Reiner is in the waiting room. This bill came out of a special task force. We made quite a few amendments in the committee in the interim. I think we actually made it much, much better. And it seems to be unscathed as it got over here, but I'm not completely sure. So General Director Reiner is in the room.
I see that. Director Reiner, we can't get away from calling you General. I'm sorry. Welcome to Senate Corporations and House Bill 15. If you could lead us through quickly, we've got about 20 minutes to work this. So.
You bet, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, happy to be here. For the record, my name is Luke Reiner, Director of YDOT, and I still answer to General and Director. So if I could ask you, maybe Amanda, let Mr. Babbitt in as well. I'd appreciate that because I'll ask him to say a couple of words. Mr. Chairman, regarding Senate file or correction, this House bill, what Senator Case said is exactly right. This came out of the broadband task force that we worked hard during the interim. The original concept was expanding the WyoLink system using CARES funding to enhance broadband expansion around the state. That was the original nexus. And we estimated that about 17 new towers would fill out the system. And we actually did submit a request for that money, for that CARES money. It was not approved for multiple reasons. But in that process, the discussion of the mechanics of how YDOT would support the broadband initiative across the state was certainly had. And really the short story here is that the focus of the state in this broadband is to support the expansion and to use all state assets to expand broadband. And we certainly support that. As Senator Case said, this bill went through many iterations. And in the end, we settled on simplicity. And I do need to actually thank Senator Case for the simplicity of this bill, because he was very instrumental in the language here. And as he indicated, it is the same language as the bill started. There were no amendments in the House. And so let me just maybe walk you through the bill. But again, the intent of this bill is how we use YDOT assets in terms of WyoLink towers to support broadband expansion across the state. And so if you flip over really to page 2 of the bill, you'll see there's a lot of deletions in here. And I'm going to really focus on what still remains, because it adds to the simplicity of the bill. And so really what you see is, line 1 says, telecommunications company can apply to the Wyoming Department of Transportation. And then on line 5, there's a line that says may. And you can see that the word shall was deleted and the word may was inserted to lease excess capacity on our towers. And the may we thought was important, and certainly support that word, because it allows us to work within current contracting laws to lease our space, and it allows us to actually trade space on, one of our towers for maybe a telecommunications space on a telecommunications tower, if that makes sense. So it creates some flexibility for us, which we find very helpful. If you go then to line 6, it talks about state-funded communication infrastructure. And so the state-funded is important there because of this. Currently, we're in the process of, we're getting close to having 93 total WildLink towers in this state. 77 of them were originally built with state funds. 16 of those are in the process of being built, and some are complete. They're built with federal money. And we are not authorized to lease space on those towers based on current federal rules. And so that's why the state funded was added in there. So really, you go down through there, and the next discussion then really starts on line 21, where it says all monies received from any lease executed, pursuant to this statute goes into a WildLink tower maintenance account, and that's what we use to help maintain the towers. So we see that as helpful in terms of taking the revenue generated from these potential leases and turning it around and helping fund our WildLink towers. Now you may be wondering, hey, what's the lease rate, and is that going to fix all the funding issues with our WildLink towers? And I wish the answer was yes, it will. Here's the rough numbers. So out of those 77 state-owned towers, we think that about less than 20% would work. And would work is really in terms of have space and really the structural strength to carry and accommodate other equipment, because they were built really just to support all the apparatuses that go into a WildLink tower. And so we think, maybe half of those might end up being used. In terms of the rate, we completely understand the state's intent about rates, and so would anticipate that the charge would be about between 4 and 10% of the anticipated gross revenue that a provider would charge or would earn from that site. So if you look at the fiscal note, we estimate, an annual return of about $3,500. So not a lot of money, but again, that's not the purpose of the bill. It's to support and use our assets to support broadband expansion around the state. We would certainly seek 10-year leases, and all of our sites have already been shared with industry. Mr. Chairman, that's a quick rundown of the bill. With your permission, I'd like to ask Mr. Babbitt if he'd like to add anything, and then how about we just have YDOT stand for questions?
Absolutely. Mr. Babbitt, welcome to Senate Corporations.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me okay?
Very well.
I agree with everything that Director Renner said. A couple of things I just want to, the WildLink towers, one thing we would just not want to compromise any public safety of our existing system that we've already built. So as the director said, each one of these sites would be a site-by-site analysis, whether that means take a look at interference issues or structural analysis, equipment size, vertical separation, wind environmental issues, easement issues, security issues. All of those things really are the reason we have to take a look at each one of those individually to see if it works. We have a very good working relationship with a lot of our service providers, and I think we've got an opportunity for a win at YDOT as well. If in fact we do some of these share these towers, there's a possibility to get some redundancy or some backhaul to what was our only dedicated microwave backhaul. So as the advancements happen with broadband across the state, not only would we be helping trying to pick up some rural customers for service providers, but it's a win-win. We possibly have an additional backup system route for some of our emergency responders. And with that, I would take any questions.
Thank you. Questions for Mr. Babbitt or Director Reiner? Thank you. We have Liz Zerga in the waiting room. Welcome, Ms. Zerga. Good to see you again. Welcome to Corporations.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Liz Zerga, representing the Wyoming Telecommunications Association. Good to see all of you this morning. With respect to House Bill number 15, the Wyoming Telecommunications Association is supportive of this bill. We believe that it is a relatively small bill that codifies practice that has been instituted since Director Reiner came into the Transportation Department. And we worked with the task force and then again with the committee over the interim, and appreciate it. And we're fine with this bill. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions from Ms. Zerger, committee? Seeing none, thank you for the testimony.
Thank you.
Do we have anyone else in the waiting room?
Mr. Chairman, I don't see anyone.
Public testimony is closed. Committee, what's Senator Case? Spacebar, you're still muted, Senator Case.
I move the bill.
Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, and I'm having internet connection troubles, so Mr. Chairman, so if I blank out, I am in favor of the bill and would be reported by ash. Mr. Chairman, I called your attention on page 3, line 2, to the words continuously appropriated. Mr. Chairman, that could be construed as requiring us to send this bill to Corporations Committee. I think it's such a small deal, they probably wouldn't want it, but I would urge the chairman to talk to the chairman of Appropriations Committee so we don't get ambushed on the floor on that particular thing.
Thank you, Senator Scott. I'd looked at that and had noticed the same. I guess my question probably goes back to Senator Case. Can we change the name WildLink to something else and have it carry through, and we don't have to talk about WildLink anymore? I'd like a new name amended in the bill. Any further testimony from the committee? Question being called. Can we call the roll, please?
Senator Boner,
Aye.
Senator Case,
Aye.
Senator Nethercott,
Aye.
Senator Scott,
Aye.
Chairman Driscoll.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, you have 5 ayes.
House Bill 15 has passed the Senate Corporations Committee. Senator Scott, question.
Yeah, question, Mr. Chairman, who do you want to carry these various bills?
I had thought about that earlier.
I'd be happy to take this one, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, well, you took the softball. That was very generous of you.
Hey, privilege of former chairman. Of course, they're all former chairmen on this committee.
It is the committee of chairmen.
So, Senator Boner, would you like to carry the alcohol bill?
I could do that, or the business code one. I'd be a little bit more comfortable with business code one, especially if the Secretary of State's office has that presentation they could forward to me.
I'll do the liquor one.
Well, you were going to get it whether you asked for it or not. So, thank you, committee. Do we want to? I'm going to pull our committee real quick before we get off. We have a bunch of other Senate files residing, and we have the opportunity to meet one more time before Friday. Do we want to go ahead and take up some Senate files and have them teed up for the next session? We have that ability, and I'm going to lean on my committee to tell me whether they want to do it or whether you wait until we come back into face-to-face. Let's do a tiny bit of discussion. Senator Boner.
Mr. Chairman, I'd be open to that, but it depends on the bill. If it's something that needs some work, maybe best to push off to the in-person portion. But if it's something that you believe we can get done via remote meeting, then I'd be all for it.
Senator Scott.
Same sentiment, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Case, I saw you make a motion at one point.
Mr. Chairman, I would support that idea. I think it's a good idea. I think we don't realize how jammed up the March meeting the legislature is. And if we had completed first committee work on some of these bills, I think that'd be a very good thing.
Thank you. I appreciate all of you because I think we're going to get into problems with personal bills. So we'll probably put up 3, 4, or 5 bills. I'm open if any of you have bills would prefer to see. We have some in the queue out there, I believe. We'll dig through those and I'll use everyone's recommendations. But let's plan on today is Tuesday. Let's plan on Thursday morning. We'll meet again as normal and try to get some of these bills out. Thank all of you for everything. Senator Nethercott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just as a question, I think maybe my other chairman might appreciate too. I heard you say when we started the meeting that we had to get them out today to be heard by the end of the week. So if we meet Thursday morning, are we just moving it out of the committee to hit Cal in March? Is that my understanding?
Senator
Yeah.
Nethercott, that's correct. These will be Senate files, not House. Well, there could be a few House bills too, but could be Senate files as well. We can run both, but they're ready to hit the committee of the whole when we come back in. And I'm really concerned about personal bills. I know we've got a lot of them and they matter to everybody. And if we time out this deal, it's going to get hard. And it also complicates our general session or the second session coming. So, further questions, anybody? Thank you, guys. It really is